Welcome to Revolutionary War Rarities, the podcast of the Sons of the American Revolution. Like, follow, and subscribe to our podcast in your favorite application. You can also follow our podcast at fastfunhistory.com. For education resources provided by the National Society Sons of the American Revolution, go to education.sar.org. And now, Revolutionary War Rarities.
An American Triumph, Season 2. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Revolutionary War Rarities. My name is Jim Griffith.
And my name is Jim Maples.
Well, Jim Maples, today is a very, very special episode with a very, very special guest. His name is Tom Hand, and he is the creator, the founder of Americana Corner. And that can be found at www.americanacorner.com. He is an accomplished author. He's a graduate of West Point. He is on the board of directors for the American Battlefield Trust. His most recent publication is entitled, as you might imagine, An American Triumph. And Tom has graciously contributed numerous books or numerous copies of his book for giveaway to Revolutionary War Rarities listeners, and we're thankful for that. We intend to give one of those books away today. So make sure and stay tuned on how you can be one of those winners of the book. So Tom, thank you for your donation of the books to Revolutionary War Rarities, and we thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, fellas. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be on Revolutionary War Rarities, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So Tom, if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear about your inspiration for the book. What drove you to write An American Triumph, and what were you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, I wanted to remind my fellow Americans of their nation's incredible past and of the truly inspirational nature of our founding era. I'm concerned, Jim, that we're starting to lose sight of that. And so that was the motivation behind the book. And I guess what I'm hoping to accomplish, one little book, is to rekindle the spirit of patriotism in Americans. I think we have lost that desire to flag wave. I'm a big flag waver. I think more people should do that. I'm just hoping that I can rekindle that spark just a bit.
It's a good point, Tom. It really is. Now, I've had the tremendous pleasure of reading your book. I really like the way that it's laid out. It's broken down into a lot of chapters, but very short chapters, very specific and to the point. And for those of us who have a bit of ADD in their lives, I think that it certainly works well for me. But I've got three questions. For you. First of all, I know you jumped into a good bit of detail around three individuals, which was Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and John Adams. So my three questions are, first of all, what drove you to those three? Second of all, if there were another three, who would those three be? And third, the third question is, do you foresee a sequel to this book?
Yeah, I'll take those questions in order. Service to country is why I selected those three. To me, those three men epitomize service to country. Others contributed, certainly. But these three really devoted most of their life to that. And so I selected them to be the three main protagonists in the book. And in my mind, Jim, there's a huge drop off once you get past those three.
Yeah.
And so is there a second tier of three? I suppose an argument can be made for those that like Thomas Jefferson or Alexander Hamilton and other people like that, Nathaniel Greene. But to me, it's a steep drop off. And I won't go into too many details about why I feel that way, but I felt like the three that I selected were the greatest founders for devoting their life to the country that they loved. And is there a sequel? Yes. In fact, I finished it last weekend, and we hope to come out with it next fall. We're going to try to do one book per year, good Lord willing, and take us all the way through chronologically to Reconstruction. And I've had a lot of people, Jim, that have asked me, do you just fund Revolutionary War sites? Do you just write about that? And the answer right now is that's all I write about, because I'm trying to do it in a chronological manner. But next year's book will take us a little bit deeper into our nation's past. So,
Okay, very good. Thank you for that.
Tom, do you believe there's a single event that, had it not occurred or had been handled differently, could have permanently prevented the American Revolution?
well, that's a great question, isn't it, Jim? To me, the one event that drove us to our independence was the French and Indian War. I think that the consequences, unintended consequences of that war, primarily from a financial standpoint, drove some legislation that wouldn't have been driven necessarily had it not been for the financial straits of England after the war. And quite frankly, the American colonists were one of the least taxed people in the world, and much less than the people living in England. Right. And if looking back without bias, you have to say that what Parliament had proposed was reasonable. However, for 150 years or so, England had practiced salutary neglect. Some people call it benign neglect. They let us run our own country, our own colonies. And frankly, we were good at it and we liked it. And so all of a sudden, it's like a student moving back in home and all of a sudden having parental controls thrust on you. You don't like it. And we didn't like it. And so the French and Indian War, to me, if that didn't happen, I think we continue along with the same sort of system we had up until 1763. But I add one other thing, if I may. It's the revolution, I don't think, turns out the same way if Washington doesn't cross the Delaware Christmas night. And I know we talk about the 10 crucial days. To me, there was one crucial day, and that was crossing that Delaware. There were three organizations, armies that were supposed to cross. Only Washington made it, and then successfully captured the Hessian garrison at Trenton. That doesn't happen. Princeton doesn't happen, and everything else doesn't happen. And so, and the soldiers were melting away faster than they were coming in. And so Washington doesn't make that happen successfully. I don't think the rest of the revolution happens. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with the benign neglect. That's something that's always been interesting to me. And I'll tell you that when you think about, we recently did an episode, Tom, called Cause and Effect. And history is the earliest warning system that we have out there. That's one of the points that we made out there. And to look at the dramatic difference that some of these efforts made, right? Like you said, the soldiers in the American Revolution were melting away. Mm-hmm. And by, I believe it was January the 1st, he was basically going to have no army. He had very little when he attacked Trenton. And it certainly turned it on its nose and started aiming things in a better direction. You can even look at the odds of winning. I read an article one time on the internet that was that tracked the odds of winning the American Revolution through the American Revolution. And at that time, I mean, there was 95% chance that the revolution was lost. But if Las Vegas had existed back then, I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question that had you bet on the Americans prior to Trenton, the payback would have been pretty significant from a Vegas perspective. So,
well, yeah, I agree. Saratoga happened, and of course France came in officially, but they were already sending us arms and money behind the scenes, and that was going to continue as long as we were fighting their enemy. They're going to be our friend.
That's right.
Yeah, so
that's exactly right.
You've partially answered this, but of the three men that you focus on in An American Triumph, could our country exist today without any of them? And which one do you find to be the most interesting?
Those are two separate questions, and I'm gonna two different guys. To me, Jim, the country as we know it today doesn't exist without George Washington. People have labeled him the indispensable man. What a great term for what he was and what he meant to this country. I think without George Washington at the command of the Army for 8 years, maybe we don't persevere through, maybe we don't cross the Delaware. And maybe at the end, if we do win the war, that guy, an Alexander Hamilton type or Horatio Gates type, doesn't surrender power to the Annapolis Congress on December 23rd of 1783. Maybe the next guy he gets elected president, but he doesn't surrender the presidency to John Adams. I mean, he was remarkable. Jim, he was that remarkable blend of courage, the courage it takes to lead men into battle with bullets flying around you and not ducking. No, I couldn't do that, I don't think. And the humility to voluntarily surrender power. That is a combination that's rare. And what a great man at the right point in time, almost like providentially directed, in my opinion. But he's not as interesting to me personally as John Adams. I just love John Adams. John Adams, what a great guy, cantankerous, irritable, but brilliant, and devoted this country like nobody else except for Washington, of course. And so John Adams, to me, I just love, and his letters that he wrote, he loved watching his own writing, I think, and great stories with he and Abigail and his exchange with Jefferson at the end. The inner man. You don't know that with Washington. Most of his letters were burned by Martha. And he wasn't that kind of guy that you get to know anyway. So I think Adams is incredibly interesting throughout his whole life. Do you guys have a favorite guy?
Well, I agree with you on George Washington. We would not exist today without him, and also on John Adams. Totally fascinating. But I really like Ben Franklin also.
Yeah, you're right.
His whole life was it's just incredible. We've done an episode on him, and I'd love to do another episode.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, the thing that Benjamin Franklin was everything that people want to be, and he was everything that people don't want to be. And right, I mean, he was basically he was friends with the British. He was a loyalist initially, right? And then he was at war with the British, and he was initially at war with the French, and then he was France's best friend, and probably the greatest diplomat that we've ever had. He is. What do they say? What is it? A mystery wrapped in a what is
enigma?
An enigma. Yes, an enigma.
That's too complicated for me. I can't figure that out.
Okay, Tom, talk to us about the national boundaries that were initially proposed by the French at the peace negotiations in Paris.
Yeah, Jim, it's amazing. Vergennes, the French minister, talking about the friendship of France. They were our friends, sort of. They were struggling to get the treaty agreed to, and Ben Franklin was the primary guy. Vergennes wouldn't talk to Adams. He was too much of a bulldog. Adams was, and so and Franklin was a diplomat, and so they talked back and forth nicely, and what Vergennes proposed was to end the 13 colonies basically on the crest of the Appalachians, and to surrender what ended up being the Northwest Territory, giving that back to the province of Quebec. George Rogers Clark had captured most of that, mostly small battles, small fights, but still, we had it. And Vergennes was generous to give it back to England. Didn't really care about us so much. He wanted to create an Indian territory west of the Appalachians, nominally administered by the Spanish. And so basically, and then Spanish Florida, British Florida, going back to Spanish Florida. And so we were going to be surrounded and truncated off. We couldn't grow. And John Adams said, I don't think so. And he and John Adams raced back from the Netherlands. We had just secured a treaty. John Jay said, we got to do something about this. And they go to David Hartley, the negotiator for the Brits. And they say, here's the deal. We're going to talk directly with you. And what we got was what we got, and incredibly generous. And that happened because of John Adams, but the French were going to sell us out. I'm not supposed to say that, but that's what they were going to do.
Isn't it true that the British were actually much more open to the territories in the peace treaty, or the Treaty of Paris, than the French were? Is that a true statement?
That's very true. Yeah, and but yeah, it was the French who were just willing to basically fence us in.
Yeah.
And this great country wouldn't be what it is today if we'd taken those. Jim, you were going to say something. Did you have a comment on that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Well, I think it seems like it always goes back to the same thing back then and today, which is money, or in this case, I think they wanted the territories for the raw materials and the mercantilist system that was in place between each of the countries.
That's right, exactly right. Yeah, it was all about money, like it always is, and as George Washington mentioned in the farewell address, all nations act in their own best interest.
Yep.
And if you become I think he used the term slave, you become a slave to another country, or an enemy, a permanent enemy to a country, you do yourself a disservice, because you have to take care of yourself. And anyway, so
yeah. All right, so Tom, we love the rarely known, the rarely taught, the little known facts around the American Revolution. That's what we do here at Revolutionary War Rarities. So I'm curious if there was anything that you discovered in your research for this book that you had never heard of before.
I can't say that I never heard of before, but I did have one compelling surprise to me, and that was the relative insignificance of Thomas Jefferson to our founding era, and the relative significance of John Adams. Now, full disclosure, I'm a huge John Adams fan, but if you think about Jefferson's role, I'm say 1775, Second Continental Congress through 1783, even through 1787 Constitutional Convention, it's hardly anything. He wrote a great Declaration of Independence. I give him credit for that. Beautiful writer. He hardly participated in the debate over independence. Hardly said a word. Very quiet man. And then he goes overseas. He's a minister to France, but never gets any treaties signed. Did a lot of shopping. Enjoyed that over there, I guess. He didn't participate in the Constitutional Convention because he was overseas in France. Never served in the army, even though he was the ripe age for that. He was a healthy man, great writer. Never donned his nation's uniform, and it's his choice certainly, but he never did at a time when all the other men around him were doing it. Marshall, Monroe, Hamilton, they all did, except for Jefferson. And the older guys didn't, of course. Adams didn't. And so he didn't do much except write a beautiful Declaration of Independence. And I didn't realize that until I went through this looking for things to applaud Jefferson for. And then I found this guy named John Adams, who almost single-handedly got the Declaration of Independence unanimously approved. And as Benjamin Rush famously said, John Adams was the man in the house. He served on 90 committees, 90, and he was a chairman of 25 committees, 20, and he almost worked himself to death. Then he goes overseas, and he's a diplomat for 10 years. He gets a treaty with the Dutch passed. He gets a huge loan, $5 million from the Dutch. He's responsible for the Treaty of Paris terms, as we talked about earlier. And that's his 10 years as a diplomat. And so in so many ways, John Adams was just more significant to our founding than Thomas Jefferson. And yet for some reason, we have a memorial on the tidal basin in DC to Jefferson, and Adams is largely forgotten. And I don't understand that.
Well, Tom, listen, we thank you so much for being on Revolutionary War Rarities. I want to thank you again for those extra copies of your book. We would love to have you back again sometime if you're willing, and I want you to make sure and let people know how they can reach you or get to the information that you provide on Americana Corner.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's been a real pleasure being on Revolutionary War Rarities. Thank you for having me on. And I will plug the book one last time. It's available on Amazon. It's available on our signed copies on my website, AmericanaCorner.com. I'd love to come back and talk with you guys. It's been a ton of fun talking about the Revolutionary era. And I also want to say thank you for the good work that you guys do. You guys keep alive the memory of our country, and you can do so much more than I do. And you guys have chapters all over the country, and I just admire what you've done for so long, for over a century now. It's like 130 years or so. I think you guys have been around. And anyway, so yeah, thank you for having me.
And that, my friends, is a Revolutionary War rarity. My name is Jim Griffith.
And my name is Joe Maples, and we thank you for joining us today. And please be sure to join us for the next episode of Revolutionary War Rarities. This has been a production of the National Society Sons of the American Revolution, www.sar.org.
To be entered into a random drawing for a free copy of the book, An American Triumph, please complete the following. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Revolutionary War Rarities. Join our Facebook group of the same name. Follow our Instagram page of the same name, and share this episode on social media. Once you've done those, send your name to revolutionarywarrarities@gmail.com. Good luck.